Mystical growth, 11-13-17. I love organic chemistry. Laws man's laws are subject to. I remember one day in lab trying to get a product to crystallize so I could calculate yield. The solution was being stubborn, as if the molecular components contained a mind of their own. "Professor Warner," I called out. As I waited, I contemplated what to say, mental scenario, role play, so I could figure out the solution at hand. "Yes, Austin," Professor Warner spoke. "The solution isn't crystallizing. I followed the instructions to a T, but for some reason I'm stuck in this phase." Well, I'm not quite sure what's wrong myself. You know, we all used to joke in grad school, solidification through crystallization is a superstitious ordeal. Tap your magic wand 3 times on the flask, read the chemical reaction out loud to your experiment. Make sure your spelling was correct, the difference in which could result in your interpretation and execution being far from the desired. Taboo it all was, or was it? Then, it would just crystallize, and we were all lost as to how it happened. "Give it some time," he said. "I'll come check back up on you in a moment, and we'll see where we're at." Time was the thing I needed least during this time. Time to let my mind wander, especially after hearing how much superstition was involved in science. From the prestigious professor, I wondered, the world is so amazing. Sometimes it just leaves me in awe, as if I can only open up to receive it, but I'm unable to process it due to its enormosity and spectacular wonders. So strange to think I am a part of this thing. I am made from it, yet I don't know it, and it hides from me. Maybe more for some and less for others, I thought, as genius does arise. But maybe it's for the best. What would there be to wonder at if I knew all that was? "How's it coming along?" Startled, I suddenly yet rigidly reacted, as if I had rusted mechanics, huh? "The experiment, has it crystallized yet?" "Oh no, not yet," looking at my workspace. The only thing that had changed was my notebook. It now had 50 different graffitied style ways in which to write my name. Some palm trees, a mountain landscape with some snow, and a fading sun partially behind one of the slopes. "Oh, I see," the professor said, as if he had looked across my notes at a glance, coming to the realization that I was as lost as my experiment. "We'll give it some more time. I'll come over and check in before we should start to clean up." As he walked away, I thought, I'm so glad he said should instead of need or have, which are words that can hardly ever be used in total confidence. Realizing my mind was already wandering, I tried to focus it, like being present as to where I was and what was going on would change the outcome of the scenario. I mean, it would, because if I wasn't focused on the moment, then I would be more likely to make a mistake, rationally speaking. But everyone knows an anxious mind is more likely to mess up than a relaxed one. But relaxation was never achieved out of sheer will. Ugh, I was doing it again. Maybe if I outlined where I was, I would be lost in it. An OChem lab. I knew the layout by heart. That had been what the first test was on. In the northwest corner was one of the eye wash and shower stations. Strange that the first thing I was to recognize was the safety zones, but not so strange, for danger was one of the first and most frequent topics drilled into the brain in the class. There was a head table facing in a direction opposite all the others. That's where the professor usually hung out. I probably recognized that second due to all the time I constantly spent going back and forth to it. The tools designated our own for the semester lay in an assigned cupboard. Don't break anything, or you can't afford your week's worth of pasta. The classroom lab equipment specifically for a given lab in the far north cabinets, a weighing station, and where the designated lab chemicals lay for procurement. On the table, attached to the windowed wall, shutters almost always closed, UV contamination. In the middle lay the students, researchers, and general work area, a place where people were highly protective of their space. But when things weren't working out, nothing worked like picking someone else's brain, whose experiment did work. So there always seemed to be a constant shuffling of people back and forth, working together on a single issue. Made me ponder as to why we were tested as individuals, when in the real world, application, utilization of multiple persons wasn't restricted. Maybe we should get a partial grade in each class on social skills. and our ability to open another's mind, finding and applying the knowledge within. Probably wasn't so because the world relies on people being greedy. So nobody wants to share so they can take credit, and with credit, they can live above others. As they are more qualified, making more money, it was extremely competitive. Most alumni were on the route towards medical practice, a position held in high regard. For people fear death and are willing to pay arm and leg for eternity. Some researchers looking to create the next big drug, which ironically was usually an isolation of a chemical compound found in a naturally occurring plant, packaged up all nice and neat and then marketed to the masses. A few others, but scientifically insignificant. I then decided to apply weasel tactics, racking the brains of others through menial conversation, slowly opening them up towards sharing their secrets to success. You couldn't just go up and ask anyone. Nobody wanted to be that guy. People viewed it as cheating. You had to really work the person. And the people who usually knew exactly what they were doing were the least likely to open up about it, for fear that there may be some serious repercussions for sharing the wealth. So I rambled, struck up conversation with just enough relativity to be engaging. For the setting, scientifically intriguing, can't catch a fish who likes worms with the spinner, worming in the experiment at hand ever so slightly, then acting as if you genuinely wanted to hear their opinion, until they would actually spill the goods. I was no better than any of them. Reporting back to my lab partner Casey occasionally, who was religiously watching the flask, a magnetic vortex of spinning dull yellow fluid suspended above our magnetic heating element, temperature being watched, the magnetic bar within the flask being watched, altering its RPMs on the unit, trying to find the hot zone to spur on crystallization. Nothing was happening, except we were slowly growing older. So I left again in pursuit of the hidden wisdom for which we were missing. The professor busy helping students, and again, nobody wanted to be that guy, so I left him alone. I usually resorted to philosophical type discussions, trying to somehow subtly insinuate how little each of us knew, as if the fact would open someone up enough to fill in my ignorant void. Crazy, right? It's like we are creating our own microverse in here, separating a process from the outside world. Then by separation, it's almost as if we are able to replicate a natural process and alter time through an input of energy so we can witness it within our lifetimes. A simulation, a planned process in a sea of chaos, an illusion of control, all a part of the plan. Crazy, right? Did you ever stop to think that complex technological devices are just an amalgamation of elemental components, oscillating crystals, vibrating in a specific manner to produce a visual and interactive machine by proper layout? Maybe there is some truth in actual science to the pseudoscience, to the spiritual and mystical. I mean, is science really so far from religion? We are in here acting religious, following scripture as if it were a ritualistic behavior. Why do the masses and media often paint a picture so separate between the concepts of God and the operations of the universe? I mean, define worship, adhering to a specific behavior consistently. Are we devout worshipers? Did you watch the football game last night? You never knew who you were going to have to talk to, so it was a safe bet to involve yourself in many aspects of life, never knowing who the closet geniuses were going to be and what they would be into, a secret to passing the class, widening your ability to specifically connect. I returned back to the experiment with the results from my latest experiment. Turns out the whole class was having issues, and it wasn't just us. It was always reassuring to find out a fellow classmate known to be a whiz was also having problems, however sadistic that may sound. I sat back down and gazed into the flask, mesmerized by it, like sitting around a fire, entranced by the flames. For whatever reason, it was calming. I had done all I could do, short of kicking the apparatus, spilling the components, shattering the glass. But maybe the rapid change in environment would induce the phase change. I could then scrape up the yield for analysis and say I bumped it on accident. And if nothing happened, I would be acquitted due to the unforeseeable incident. Such were the thoughts. The results of this class would ultimately result in my position in life, but my partner would never go for it. He was too much of a goody two-shoe. And besides, my reputation would be somewhat tarnished by such an incident, having had no accidents thus far, and compliments of the analysis lab, some of the highest and purest yields of all students. Looks like I was going to have to bite the bullet on this one. Just then, I stared in amazement as something began to happen.
Magic.
Starting at a single point, it was as if the entire solution had begun to freeze over, spreading throughout like a spider web. An amazing design began to take hold, becoming almost slushy-like in texture. I nudged my partner, Casey. Are you getting this? We had to record down every detail of the operation, and only in pen, reassuring us of our inability to make a mistake and of its importance. I shut down the reaction, the magnetic stir rod now jumping frantically through the flask, not poetically whirring in a fluid any longer, clashing against the sidewalls made of glass. Stopped as I used forceps to maneuver the flask over an inert environment so it could cool to room temperature. A smell began to fill the air. The product was aromatic. A resonating ring-like structure, now almost appearing as fluffy flakes like snow. I can still recall its smell to this day, something completely unique. Recalling it almost brings me back to that moment. Amazing that such things even happened, let alone in a lab, but crystals
In such.
form in the natural world and are a part of our lives. Biochemical processes helping us balance. Mystical growth, as if the components of the world itself is somehow a living system, aware, seeking, like unto ourselves, and as knowledge about its secrets become known, they are crystallized. Mental scenario roleplay. We all used to joke in grad school, solidification through far from the desired outcome. But maybe it's for the best. What would there to be? Well, we'll give it some more time. It leaves me in awe, as if I can only open up to receive it. Taboo it all was. That man on a motorcycle just because. Done all I could do, short of kicking the apparatus. So I rambled, struck up conversation with just enough relativity to be engaging. I don't know it. And it hides. It hides from me. Maybe more for some. When in the real world, application, utilization of multiple persons wasn't restricted. Maybe we should get a partial grade in each class on social skills. Subtly insinuate how little each of us knew, almost pseudoscientifical. I merely reasoned with people. I mean, the product was aromatic. A resonating ring-like structure, alone in a lab, but crystals in such form in the natural world. Stir rod now jumping frantically through the flask, not poetically whirring in the fluid any longer.